Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic, and I am the founder of the Summit Leadership Alliance and host of these TechTonic Conversations, where we're bringing to you guests, experts on different topics that are important to technology leaders, technology executives, and just general enterprise tech curious audiences. Well, today I have a very, very special guest. I am thrilled to welcome back my colleague and my friend, David Linthicum. Thank you, David, for finding the time to be with us this afternoon now.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
This will be fun. David is an internationally renowned cloud computing and AI thought leader, influencer, enterprise technology strategist, educator, award-winning publicist, uh, and really a source of wealth of knowledge and insights, first-hand insights on these critical topics of today's day and age. Artificial intelligence, cloud computing, technology leadership. And we thought this would be a very good and interesting moment in time to actually have the conversation about what is really happening out there in these three intertwined, superbly important domains, the domains of cloud computing, artificial intelligence, but also very importantly, tech leadership. As in, so what do we as tech leaders need to, how do we show up and what do we need to do to succeed in this environment? So David, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm going to delve right into the conversation and remind our audiences that, well, this is going to be recorded and posted on TechTonic Conversations YouTube channel. This is actually now happening live on this lovely Monday, February 3rd, 2025. So if you have any questions or comments for me or David, please use the Q&A function of this Zoom platform and engage in the conversation. So let's start. Maybe we start with cloud computing first. So David, I was curious to get your take on what do you see the most significant developments in cloud computing, perhaps over the last year or so, and how do they impact enterprise architecture?
Yeah, I mean everything has been Gen AI all the time, and everything. The cloud computing conferences have turned from cloud focus to generative AI focus. So it is that and getting the data correctly, correct on those platforms and getting those things up and running. So GPU-based workloads and how do you localize the data? So it's kind of moved from the discussion around migration, normalization of the data on the platforms to how do we get to the next generation systems and using this technology and support of it. And so you don't have cloud conversations anymore without talking about that. It's always dragged in. And certainly even the revenues of some of the cloud providers are tied to their AI revenues. So that's been the big focus. My thing is that's all well and good, and I think we're glad we're moving in that direction. There's going to be some value there, but we still have to focus on what's important in terms of infrastructure and storage and databases and monitoring and things like that. I think the big trend in the cloud computing world right now is moving to heterogeneity. In other words, it's been moving to multi-cloud for a long period of time, but the ability to support multiple cloud providers using the same infrastructure under the same roof of the enterprises, the ability to support on-premise systems, the ability to support hybrid-based computing, and the ability to deal with all that by normalizing the complexity and putting that into a particular domain, we're able to manage it. So the AI is going to make a lot of that stuff worse because we're going to move into heterogeneous environments to support the new GPU-based platforms we're looking to get into and the databases and data platforms we're looking to get into. And so it's just adding additional services that are under management for most of these enterprises out there. So now the turn is going to be in terms of how we're going to manage this complexity, observability systems, the ability to deal with FinOps, and the ability to manage these things in a cost-efficient way. And efficiency becomes kind of the core issue there. It's funny, you heard efficiency and utilization kind of at the first time at reInvent last year in December. And you never heard it before because everything, well, who cares about efficiency? Who cares about cost effectiveness? And now they realize that their customers are looking at their cloud bills, they're too expensive. They're trying to figure out how to normalize the spending, how to get in underneath management, how to optimize some of the architectures, and in the light of the fact that everything's moving into AI, how to do that before they start adding these AI expenses on top of it.
Yeah, yeah. There certainly has been, and I know this from clients I work with, a big concern about cloud costs that seem to be now getting out of hand. And what they're saying is like the initial push here was about optimization of costs and ability to be elastic and move the demand up and down and costs up and down. But th that seems to have increased in its cost and concern about it. So you mentioned FinOps. Have you seen any strategies you can share that of tech leaders who are successfully able to sort of navigate that and optimize cloud spending? Have you seen some emerging trends or good strategies or tactics to address that?
Yeah, it starts with the people, doesn't start with the technology. So you kind of have to have a culture of optimization and observability and accountability uh, in these infrastructures where that wasn't there before. So in other words, developers really didn't think much in terms of how much storage they were allocating and allocating and compute they're allocating, and it just kind of went on and was normalized and was absorbed into the bill. I even remember when I was a developer, I was working at Boeing Computer Services. I didn't care about the bill, even though we were paying for a service. In other words, it was a timeshare service. It didn't bother me that much of whether I was spending, $100,000 or $1,000 a month. That day, those days are over. And so producing a culture of accountability and a culture of education and getting that into the hands of the people who are leveraging this technology. This is not about just allocating resources and using resources, more resources than you need. This is about allocating the exact amount of resources that are going to be there to do the job and returning the resources back to the pool when we're done. The ability to have accountability in terms of how you're dealing with these resources, the ability for centralization, observability of the financial metrics. And so we're figuring out how much we're spending and how much are under optimized and how much are under optimized and what needs to be fixed in these environments. And the people just becomes the hardest thing to solve. We always had cost accounting with cloud computing. You could do it on Excel if you needed to. It wasn't very efficient, but now we have these very advanced FinOps tools. But unless they're met with an education, unless they're met with a culture of accountability, optimization, and your ability to look out for the business as well as the technology infrastructure, it's just not going to work. And I find that the organizations that work from the people down to the technology, successful. Organizations try to work from the FinOps technology up to the people, never successful. They just got to change the expectations there. And that's where leaders come in. They lead by demand, they lead by a change agent, and you're able to do this and implement this to make everybody's lives easier by leveraging this technology, more accountable, and more cost-effective use of cloud resources in getting these cultures in place.
So, like most things these days in technology is available and it works. However, what you do with it, in other words, what your people are compelled to do with it, is where the winners or losers will emerge. And I have this book at my top of my Start with Why. Get everybody, in other words, to understand why, and then you can actually build behind it. You mentioned observability. I guess with absolutely critical component for both providers, I guess, and the consumers of the service to have clarity and be able to actually understand how their actions adding or not adding to these additional costs and complications, right? So
Absolutely.
people,
Yeah, observability is key to it because you have to
yeah,
remember we have to have understand the not just cost accounting that's coming out. Okay, I can see how much I'm spending on storage bills and database bills and network transfer bills and egress and ingress, fees. But the reason I'm spending it becomes more important, and we never really solve for that side of the equation. So in other words, people would show me how many resources they're using, but when I asked why they're being used and who's using them, they couldn't ask me that. There was no granularity in terms of using these things. I mean, you just hit something that's an absolutely profound thing. We can make everything work if there's enough money and time. And the reality is, and then I think people took that to heart and they made these very expensive, very under optimized systems out there that need to be relooked at and made to be efficient in ways that are going to bring more value back to the business.
Yeah.
One of the big hurdles that cloud computing is running in right now is, and I write about this in my book, is the cloud costs us 2.5 times what we thought it was going to cost us when we first did it. So in other words, people, the way it was described to the zeitgeist out there, 10 years ago, was it's going to save you lots of money in resource
Yeah.
utilization and reuse and agility and all that kind of stuff. And it's all well and good, and it does do aspects of that. But how people have spent it is normally 2.5 times what they thought they were going to spend. Now, I look at those domains. People have a tendency to point at the cloud. This, but the cloud providers are charging us too much money. Normally, it's self-inflicted wounds. In other words,
Mm.
they're not spending it as efficiently as they could. They're not building architectures that are as optimized as they can be. And again, they took the network metric, and I hear this lots of times. Well, Dave, it works. I said, I know it works, but it's costing you 10 times the amount of money that
Yeah.
you should be spending on this. And now it's really kind of revisiting that, and also getting back to a shared responsibility model between them and the cloud providers. Cloud providers are utility. They publish their prices. I don't. I mean, obviously they're in the world to make money, but they're not necessarily looking to trick you into getting a larger bill. And so your ability to understand what you're spending, who's spending it, what it's being spent on, and your ability to optimize around that spending and consumption of these resources was where you need to go. And I think that comes between some responsibility of the cloud providers to put the tools in place that they need to provide this cost observability, and the cost of the employees, the developers, and the managers to have a culture in terms of using these things in a much more optimized way. The days of just spending willy-nilly are just gone.
They're gone. Yeah, they're gone. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, when you look at the environment out there, how do you see the balance between public clouds and private clouds evolving, especially in the context of this emerging hybrid solutions and multi-cloud strategies? Like, how do you see this landscape evolving?
Yeah, I mean, multi-cloud is always going to have a private cloud component. Sometimes it's going to be just a legacy system that's being leveraged as a cloud service through an abstraction layer, or a complete private cloud like an OpenStack private cloud, or even a micro cloud, like Outpost or Stack from Microsoft, which are little mini versions of their public cloud providers are able to run in the data centers. So it's becoming very complex and very heterogeneous fairly quick. So when people say we have a hybrid cloud, normally that means they have a multi-cloud, because normally they're leveraging more than one cloud provider, one cloud brand that's there, and normally it's paired with more than one on-prem system. And maybe a cloud provider, maybe, excuse me, a private cloud, it could be just a legacy systems, things like that. So everybody's moving to this heterogeneity now. So the cloud only days are gone.
Yeah,
So, 10 years ago, and I see this all the time from people who are writing and speaking about it. The days of picking cloud for every problem domain out there are gone. And back when, 10 years ago, first started getting into the cloud, it was cloud only. It's all we're doing. Cloud only. We're going to
yeah,
move to cloud, things like that. Now we realize that it's a good fit for some application workloads and data sets, but not all of them out there. And we still need to maintain some things that sit on-prem. And also on-prem has changed as well. In other words, we're using colo providers and managed service providers. We're not necessarily using an enterprise data center that the company owns, but outsourcing that to different data center operators. And so also edge computing and mobile computing and all these things that are moving forward in the emergence of 5G and the ability to kind of reach computing systems everywhere. So it's highly distributed, highly complex, highly heterogeneous, and we're moving into those environments. So hybrid cloud is going to be typically a component of that, but normally when I hear hybrid cloud, I'm going to see architectures that are much more complex, much more far-reaching, and I think that's where we're looking to move
yeah.
into. So,
This is becoming the normal for most organizations. Any predictions for serverless computing and its role in the future of cloud architecture?
yeah, just turned 10, believe it or not. So AWS Lambda was all that released, 10 years ago. And here we are today. It has lots of limitations and lots of advantages. Advantages would be I can allocate lots of resources, and I don't have to think about, I can write a function, write an application. I don't have to think about the resources to support that function. So that's in unto itself a very convenient feature. But it does have some downsides. It does has lock-in, has a tendency to be more costly, has a tendency to be less portable, which is the lock-in aspect of it. And so it's a matter of trying to work through this. And also we see some serverless stuff that's applied to Docker, sorry, to containerization into databases and things like that. So it's again, it's going to be a model that's going to be applicable in some areas and not others. It's not going to be universally, ruled. When serverless came along, people thought it was the revolution. Everybody's going to move in that direction. Everything's going to be serverless moving forward. It does have applications and does have use cases, but it's not for everything. And I think now that we understand that, and everybody's moved into containerization and cloud native systems. Serverless doesn't necessarily come along for the ride in those instances. Now we're moving into AI. There's some applications of serverless there. But it is one of these things where it's another architectural solution that meets very specific needs. And it's not a one size fits all solution. And 10 years, we took us 10 years to find that out, but here we are. Serverless has done some evolving, but I think it's kind of in diminishing use right now.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Obviously, we started this discussion with AI being the focal point of conversation now. Even when we talk about cloud, you cannot step away from AI. So maybe we should peek a little bit into that, and what are your observations and thoughts about where that is and where that is heading? And I'd love to start with the ethics question first. So when you think about deployment of AI in any cloud environments, any environments, what would you say would be the most important ethical considerations?
Yeah, it's not the if we can do something, it's should we. And I think that that becomes a question that's often not asked. I remember, I was kind of this became an issue for me 10 years ago. I built an AI system which was a recommendation engine
Mhm.
which was associated with a website that would guess who the person was using the website even before they provided any personal information. In other words, demographics, their
Mm.
race, part of the country, how much money they likely made, hobbies, and things there, and was able to accurately guess these things based on the individual using this website, which was kind of cool. But, ethically, if they're not volunteering that information, and if I'm gathering information covertly, which is fine, it's certainly legal, but, is it right? And I kind of came to the conclusion like, well, maybe, we should make people log into this system and also put out a notice that we are gathering your information as you're using the thing.
Yeah.
And we did, and I think that it made me feel much better. But I got into the first ethical dilemma, I think, in terms of AI and how it's going to be used. Now we have systems that are way more powerful.
Yep.
They're able to do way more invasive things, including understanding who we are and what we're able to do. They're able to sell us stuff that's going to be, psychologically motivated based on who we are. And we kind of have to ask the question, should we do it? And should we build systems to replace people? Should we build systems that are going to be more invasive in our personal lives? Should we build systems that may be selling stuff to people that they may not want? And I think people are taken back by that. But I think that if we take the high road on using this technology in ethical ways, we're going to be much better off as a business, much better off as people. At the end of the day, we have to deal with human beings first. They're first and foremost into this integration of this technology. So should we versus can we? We can. I can build anything you want. Should we? Different question.
It is such an important question to ask, especially now, because like the news of new capabilities are now coming at us daily. Like the progress is no longer, well, we were saying like every year something new, and then every month, then every week, then every other day. And to me today, it feels like breakthroughs are happening multiple times a day. Needles are being pushed. So in every domain of human adventure, we will be in a position to say, yes, computers can do this faster than you, smarter than you, better than you, right? So it's no longer a question of can we. The real question is should we? And collectively, I think the choice is collectively ours to see if we paint a utopian or a dystopian future out of this. Uh, Many businesses are struggling to figure out how do they now assemble the right team that can maximize the impact and value of their investment in AI, considering both technical but also ethical, soft their skills. I would love to get your perspectives on how do you think businesses can ensure that they construct the right team pointing to helping them leverage or solve their AI opportunities?
Yeah, the first advice would be build your team first. People have a tendency to acquire the technology, and I notice people are buying GPU chips by the tonnage, and without having an idea who's going to run it within their organizations. And I think you should build the organization from the top down. I think you have to hire the appropriate leadership. So you hire the right technology executives, generative AI architects, master data scientists, even an AI ethicist, just to get to your issue, because that has to be a component of this
Yeah.
as well as a security specialist and a governance specialist, and all these people with these particular meta skills who can hire the people under them. They're going to able carry out their vision and what they need to do. So, in other words, you have the business in the organization and the vision set by the board of directors who are beholden to the investor, and you're going to have to carry out implement the vision of the business. And if you're able to take the vision of the business, build an organization around it, then it's fairly easy to define the talent you're going to need to build this stuff. So in other words, before you write a piece of code, or before you buy a GPU, and so people are like, well, it's going to take us a couple of years to build the team. Should we wait to start building this stuff? No, you can build stuff as you go. You just take some baby steps and some smaller instances in how you're going to build the projects. But you start with the people first. You got to have the talent around before you make that happen. Sometimes it's going to be hiring an outside consulting company. There's great ones out there you're able to leverage, but there still should be some technology leadership in the organization and people who are beholden and responsible for making this stuff happen. And I see people who are failing with this stuff. And according to McKinsey, 80% of AI projects out there fail to deliver on ROI. Hopefully that's going to change over time. But where do these failure occurs? When I look into every one of them, they didn't build their leadership team correctly. They just threw technology at it. They put tactical talent around it. There was no, heart and soul of the project. There was no common centralized thinking in how they're going to build it, and it failed. The ones who succeeded, they had great leaders. I could talk to an individual. They could tell me the vision of the company. Could tell me the purpose of why we're going to build these AI systems. They're going to tell me everybody on their team and what they're able to do. They're able to answer most questions, not the technical questions, not engineers, but get into the leadership questions, why they exist, the business purpose, and explain it to technologists, as well as explain it to the boards of directors and the C-level folks. And I just see us very short in those individuals right now.
So what I'm hearing here is that in your experience, this concept of skunk works, let's go pilot, let's go test, let's see what emerges, is wrong. The
Yep.
right strategy is let's find first the right business executive who understands our why, but also has technology understanding, and let them build the right team with right attitude, complementary skills, including technical skills. So that should be first, then you select technology, then you start. So that's actually a very, very clearly different strategy than the strategy that many have taken, which is let's find us the cleverest technologists that we have, put them in skunkworks, sandbox them somewhere, let them play, and see what they can come up with, right?
Yeah, that's a fail fast mentality, which has its place, but it only has its place if there's a vision in place to figure out if you're failing fast in the right direction. So I'm all for moving fast and breaking stuff. I lived that my entire career, but I'm also not a fan of doing that in the context of outside of a larger vision and strategy that has to be made by leadership. Now, and so you have people in the organization, they're dying to have the vision that's articulated to them so they can start moving in that direction. If that vision's not there, they're just going to move in whatever direction they feel they should. And normally that's not going to be toward the benefit of the business. They're not going to end up pushing value back to the business. They're going to end up moving in different areas that are ultimately not going to have value. And those are the ones that are failing. That's why McKinsey sees 80% of the AI projects not providing ROI. And if you look out there, people are moving fast and breaking stuff, and they're very proud of doing that. I'm proud. I get it, but they're not moving in the correct direction because they don't have the leadership. And by the way, they're not getting the leadership from the board of directors or the C levels because they're not AI aware. They're not
Correct.
technical executives, so
Correct.
they can't take a business direction from the board of directors and the investors. They convert that into a technology strategy, and they convert that into different systems that are going to be implemented in the organization that are going to end up returning value. And that's the chain you need to work on. You can't do it backwards.
But this is so important to articulate and say. So thank you. Very, very good. Um, so we now live in this world where these mixture of experts systems are popping up. DeepSeek being one of the latest examples. Um, I wanted to ask you, given your expertise in cloud computing and AI, how do you view those mixture of expert solutions that are emerging, and what are the implications of these systems on the actual cloud-based AI applications?
Yeah, it's had a name and it's been a part of an architecture for a long period of time. We called it layered AI. And
Mhm.
so, in other words, we have AI systems that learn from other AI systems that learn from other AI systems that learn from other AI systems. And I came from the day I was an AI developer in the 80s where we did stuff like that because we couldn't afford the processing wasn't there, the capabilities weren't there. So we got creative with terms of how we're going to leverage this stuff. And I think what we're going to see is LLMs are going to be built that have a certain siloed characteristic. In other words, they could be like ChatGPT now, where they know everything, in most of the
Yep.
world because they learned from the whole of the internet.
Yep.
But I do think we're going to see these directed narrow models where they understand everything about retail, they understand everything about healthcare, they understand everything about curing cancer, which is a great objective, and they're going to be able to work together and leveraged by other LLMs and leveraged by other applications to be kind of the center of the knowledge in terms of the repository of everything that's going to be the best way to understand those systems. Right now, I think there's too many LLMs in the marketplace right now. Everybody's built one. They're $100 million to $120 million to build. They use as much power as a city uses in three
Yep.
months. And I don't think we need 20 of them. And so DeepSeek was a nice little distraction because they built something a lot
Yep.
cheaper. If you call $6 million cheaper, that's expensive in my world. But at the end of the day, we seem to be repeating the same. Seem to be solving the same problem. I understand there's limitations to LLMs; they work a little differently and things like that, and different versions of when they're there, and others can handle a massive amount of parameters. But that's not necessarily the problem I think we need to solve. I think for moving into cloud computing, it's about using our own data instead of the whole of the data on the internet and the ability to figure out how that data exists in the context of everything else. And as far as I'm concerned, people are like, well, we need to have access to an LLM based system. You shouldn't build one of those. You should use one of those. And so I'm able to going to use one or two, but I'm not going to use 20 in, in the marketplace. And I understand they're building them cheaper, but okay, if I'm able to get the core base of services from a particular LLM, say ChatGPT 3.5, and that's perfectly fine, I don't need all these other ones out there and need to iterate through it. And by the way, we're running out of data to learn from. In other words, we peaked at the data that's being generated out there. We've trained it on everything and anything. It's able to, look at the existing data that was created recently, but we're at a point where we're running out of information that's going to be used to train these models. So they're hitting a wall, a data wall, so to speak.
What an interesting truism you just shared. I actually never thought about it that way. But all of these existing large models have actually already inhaled and processed all of the public information out there. So, okay, great. I mean, phenomenal accomplishment. But you're right. How many of these should there be? The game is actually what happens on top of them, right? How do you actually take what they offer and create a super specialist? Is that fair? A
I think
super
so.
specialist.
Yeah,
And
I
then
think so.
you pair multiple super specialists into truly novel beyond human genius.
Yes.
And that will occur with these super specialist systems. Uh, wow. Wow. Um, and to add a ray of sunshine into this, I think it is really also important to mention that open source versus closed source dynamic that has played out, that I think is going to add yet another element of deep disruption around the business models that are emerging for those who have invested significant amounts in LLMs, right?
Yeah.
Deep is open source. You can read the paper, you can understand what they're doing, you can, be delighted with the ingenuity of the people that worked on it, and it's all open.
Yep, that's right. I downloaded it to my computer this weekend, so yeah, it works. I made a little LLM version of me based on everything I wrote, over the last 20 years. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the LLMs are commoditized at this point. I mean, I think OpenAI would hit me with a brick if they were in the room right now, but reality is everybody solved that problem to the degree we're trying to tune them up and make them better. And we are going to have dynamically learning models where we're not going to have to use RAG technology. They're going to be able to learn ongoing. And I think that technology is going to morph. Now we have to get to work with this stuff. So how do I use my data with
Mhm.
AI that's going to bring value back to the business? And I think many of the organizations haven't answered that question. I mean, the biggest thing right now, see this research after research, even some of the stuff Deloitte has found, that businesses are having trouble finding use cases for it. And because they see the LLM and they go, we're getting really excited. This is awesome. I can have this thing take information and have it do any number of things with information. Have it write a song about me and, generate invoices, based on raw data I'm able to feed into it. Just amazing amount of capabilities that are in there. But what ultimately is the business use case for that? And at the end of the day, that's going to have to be your data that makes the use cases for it. The ability to find smart logistics and supply chain, your ability to
Yeah.
deal with quality assurance and manufacturing, your ability to provide a better customer experience that all deals with your information. You're not going to build an LLM. You're going to build normally, it's going to be a small language model or
Oh, yes.
agentic. It's probably going to
Yeah.
leverage CPUs and then GPUs. It's going to be a much more smaller scale thing. And I think that's where the AI wars are going to be won. So everybody's focused on these massive LLMs that waste a lot of power and money. And that's all fine. I think we had to go through that. But at the end of the day, the business deployments are going to be more tactical. They're going to be much more smaller scale. They're things we're going to build in 6 months, not 6 years. They're things that are going to cost, $5 million, not $500 million. And I think that's where we need to get to work right now is figure out what those are. And those deal with ecosystems and, all the other stuff that the cloud providers are providing. I think the cloud providers are there trying to contend for that business, but we also had some of the open source players that are out there, some of the private AI clouds that are out there.
Yeah.
Lots of heterogeneity that's occurring in that space right now.
So David, I would love to. So this is fantastic. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. I actually agree with everything that you're saying. I would like to go back to rewind us back maybe 3 years ago, and I was reading this book by Yuval Noah Harari about, the Homo Deus, humans evolving into demigods with our capability to be superbly, well, actually to create consciousness, to create life. And he was posturing here that we have a utopian scenario here and dystopian scenario. And one of the dystopian versions was, and let's play back 3 years, that when general artificial intelligence emerges, that it will be controlled by a government, any government, a government, and it will be the moment it happens, they will be so far ahead of the others that they will actually be in a winning position. That game is over. They won. What has played out is actually quite different. What I think has played out is a very clear democratization. Multiple organizations are coming up with multiple large language models in the United States, in the West, but also elsewhere. And now on top of that are hundreds of smaller companies figuring out these specialized systems. So it feels to me like we've dodged the bullet of being in a circumstance when one entity rules it all and that genie is out of the bottle. Do you agree with that? And do you feel that this is good for humanity?
Yeah, I do. I do. Yeah, if you would have gone back, 20 years ago, they would have looked at everybody who's sharing the LLM models, even some of the open AI stuff, even though some of that stuff is not shared. but certainly stuff with DeepSeek and some of the others that are out there, Llama for instance, would have been weird to them. In other words, why are you sharing such a powerful concept? You have the keys to the kingdom. Don't share it, patent it, copyright it,
Yeah.
and then you go ahead and make all the money. Like we saw with the rise of the internet, some things like that. But people have a tendency to want to open up that technology and they won't use it unless it's open. So if they view it controlled by one single entity, even if it's a for-profit entity, it's not going to be as attractive to them. And so the
Yeah.
corporations learned early on, Google, Meta, that if they open up the technology, it's going to be easier adopted. And they're going to be able to make money on the back end with other ways to monetize the systems. They're going to come from the adoption of the technology. So I don't think it would be as popular today if it wasn't democratized, it wasn't open. And I think it's great that we're sharing the information out there. Anybody can download the code for DeepSeek or anything out there and replicate it on their system. Like I said, I did it this weekend, and it's allows us to play with the technology, build the technology in ways that are going to bring more value into the business. And I think there's going to be plenty of money to be made out there. I'm glad people do that. My faith in humanity is restored.
Yes.
No one controls it, and
Yes.
people are able to be creative and build it and use it in different ways, kind of based on the way the license agreements are written.
And yes, and I think that uh, it feels to me like the humanity was at that junction, and it happened so that we have taken a step now, maybe three steps in the actual utopia, in a good direction, right? And this is it. It is actually very energizing and exciting in a positive way. It's at least how I'm experiencing that. Um, I also wanted to make sure that we touch on the topic of leadership, tech leadership. In other words, what do people who are tasked with driving these technology portfolios, what do they need to be like, know, do, focus on, ignore, right? Um, so, from your perspective, in today's day and age, what would be those critical attributes or leadership skills for a tech leader who now faces themselves in the middle of that environment we just described?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's empathy with the people that are working for them and that are invested into the company. So, in other words, you have lots of people around that the company serves, the employees, as well as people who invest in the company. That it's a publicly traded company, they're owned, the executives and the customers of the company, and your ability to kind of have a understanding of how they participate in this ecosystem as a company and how everybody benefits from it, whether an employee, a customer, an investor, C leadership, first of all. And with that, then you figure out how you're going to return value back to the business via using technology. And by the way, notice I didn't say revenue, I said value. And so your
Yes.
ability to build innovation, your ability to build innovative differentiators within the business. You're doing something new and innovative and novel into itself. Your ability to convert that into value. One of the things I learned early on, my days when I was CEO and CTO of different companies, that the value of the company was very disconnected from, at least in the technology space, in most spaces, that rate from revenue, because I was valued based on the creativity and innovation that kind of came back to the business. Revenue was going to be secondary. But if you look at the way in which we value companies now, NVIDIA gets its valuation not necessarily through its revenues, even though those revenues are really good, but the value and the creative innovation it's able to bring back to the economy. So the same thing we can do for a tire company who's manufacturing tires or automobiles or, brooms, things like that. The ability to do that in an innovative and different way that's going to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, and that's going to achieve everything we just mentioned in terms of bringing value back to the people in the organization, employees, customers, all these other things out there. And the reality is, if you make everybody happy, you make your customers happy, your employees happy, your investors happy, that's kind of the sign of success. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be revenue. Obviously, revenue is going to be a core component of that. You have to end up making money, but it's getting to that area. Now, the leaders in the area in this understand that. So if I hear leaders that are talking about quarter on quarter growth and getting upset at people because they're not bringing enough sales in, there's not a lot of tactical, selling going on. That's not necessarily a strong leader. If I hear people to understand, I can communicate a vision as to where we're looking to go, where we're going to be in a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, how we're going to be an innovative company, an innovative differentiator, have our employees explain that. That's a great leader. And that's a smaller percentage of the population out there and the leaders that I run into. That may be 30% of the people who had publicly traded companies, but they're out there. But I think those are the ones that are going to end up being successful. People are going to follow success. And so I know I did that too. I had picked mentors, throughout my career who had those sort of attributes. In other words, they were able to explain it's not about sales, it's not about revenue. It's about creative value that you're able to build. And your ability to do that and your ability to have empathy with folks in your organization down to the person who's cleaning the lobby is going to be going to your success. And that just kind of stuck with me. But I think we're going to move in that direction because people who don't move in that direction are not going to be successful. People who do are going to be successful.
This is so important. I had a pleasure of, actually, it was last week that I had spent some time with an executive team of a very large global organization that is charting new territory for their business. And it's a global business. And the chief executive officer has brought everybody into the town hall, all the leaders, all of the leaders, and they declared what is the leadership attribute expectation going forward. And when I asked you this question, you started with kindness. You started with kindness, and then you went into value creation through innovative solutions. But it was very rotated in people. What this gentleman said are expectations of leadership for his global enterprise now. Number one, humility. Number two was good judgment, right? Number three was kindness, just like you mentioned, empathy, kindness, selflessness, and teaming. So to me, like there was no, like that is, I think, what true leadership today means. How do you actually make a technologist, engineer, understand and adopt and practice these muscles that were not necessarily practiced and built previously, right? It's a new environment. Whenever a CEO of a global enterprise says, I want my leaders to all deploy humility, I want them all to understand, to be empathetic to people around them, both within our organization, but also outside, right? Those are powerful, powerful, powerful statements. Now, let's peel this tech leadership onion one layer further, if you don't mind. How do you actually foster the culture of innovation, which takes time and effort and energy, in this environment where the complexities are ever increasing, time is ever shortening, expectations are ever rising? How do you approach balancing these two things, David? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think it's fairly simple. You have to have a culture where you're willing to try things and fail. We talked about that earlier, the whole fail fast mentality. The problem is it can't lead the organization, but it needs to be fostered and promoted as a method in terms of how you get to innovation and creativity. So in other words, the only way we're going to get to that is if we try lots of stuff and have lots of discussions and have lots of arguments and have lots of thinking events where we just try things. And if you look at organizations that were able to kind of take technology to the next level, they kind of had that in common. They always did the fail fast stuff, but the thing is, they failed fast with a larger vision. In other words, there was a visionary there. There was somebody who's saying, let's go off and have fun. And if they have a culture of funness and the fact that no one is going to get blamed for failing and any of this stuff, there's no bad ideas kind of thing. We're going to kind of work through a lot of this stuff. Your ability to kind of chase windmills in many instances, and there's lots to be found there, and get to that point where we're going to get to an innovative value because we're going to fail 20 times before we're successful once. And that failure is going to cost us a lot of money and time, but the one innovation, the two innovations that come out of the areas are going to basically pay for it. And in the technology world, that's a huge thing to say. There's a lot of things that I observed in my career where it was just try, 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 fail, 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 and finally a success. And that's the one that brought the company to the next level. In my role of CTO of different organizations over time, I would try to promote a culture of just trying things. In other words, let's try it, let's keep it going. I would hire developers and hire contractors just to keep iterating through ideas and come up with different market dynamics and look at what we're looking to build. And, that's how we're able to build aspects of systems that actually made the company and took the company to the next level. But when I had a success, it was built on 20 failures, in many instances by the same people who built the creative success out of it. I just had the amount of money and time to have the thinking that we're going to iterate through this stuff to find where the creativity is. It's never going to be a eureka moment. We don't have this one idea that's going to be the killer idea that works all the time. Because even in technology, we may make the technology work, but there may not be a market for it.
Yeah.
We may have a market for it, but we can't build the technology. Somebody else is doing it. Or we're trying to be, me too, and wait for other companies to become successful and build something that's creative out of that. That never works, by the way.
Mhm.
If something was already out there as a CTO, I'm not gonna do it because somebody else did it, and then I'm not gonna be able to get there as fast as they did. Um, so having that try it, having that keep iterating through it, having that keeping at it, and having a culture around that to make it happen. So there's never a criticism for failure. You never knock people down for trying.
Yeah.
You never knock people's ideas. You never criticize people. You just encourage, 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 and you get the smartest people around you to make it happen. And if you do that, it's not a matter of if you're going to get to some sort of an innovative differentiator that's going to take the business to an enormous level. It's a matter of time. And I keep telling people that you just have to hire smart people, give them what they need, encourage them, treat them empathetically, be kind, make sure they're compensated correctly, give them the room to move, encourage the innovation, encourage making mistakes, and
Yeah.
then you'll get to it.
And at the very top, be that leader that understands how your business actually works and succeeds in the market, so that you can directionally point these people towards that
Yep.
ultimate, I guess, why, right? Otherwise, it can be, as we discussed earlier, can be scattered. So somebody needs to sort of point it towards the right ultimate direction at the top, right?
Manage by walking around. Don't
There
have
we go.
staff meetings, stuff like that. But even if it's managed by making multiple Zoom calls, if you have a distributed work environment, that's fine
Yeah.
too. But your ability to have very casual conversations with these individuals to figure out what's going on, not through these formal meetings where everybody's attending them, but having one-on-one conversations for 15 minutes, having a small stand up as to
Yeah.
what's going on, any impediments, anything I can do to make happen, and having lots of those conversations each and every week. As
Yeah.
leaders, we have a tendency to decouple from our subordinates because they're a lot of work and they take a lot of time and attention. And I understand that's the case. But the thing is, if you do that, you're not going to provide the leadership that they need. You're not going to provide the ongoing encouragement. You're not going to get around some of the problems. What will happen? People will run into barriers, and instead of solving the problem or instead of solving the barrier, they'll just kind of be stuck until they talk to somebody. But if you call them up, say having a barrier there, yeah, I need to get this particular resource. I need this particular GPU to try this thing, and it's $10,000, and I only have a $5,000 signing authority. Well, that's easy. Then
Yeah.
you're able to
Yeah.
move around, get that person going, and move beyond it. But you wouldn't have known that unless you had the conversation with that particular individual. Normally, they're not going to reach out to you. People are a little skittish about doing that. But if you have a constant conversation, you have a good casual conversation with these folks each and every day, each and every week, however often you need it, you're going to be able to figure things out, remove those barriers, get them the resources they need, and they're going to be successful. And also, they're going to think that you care about them, that
Yeah.
you care about what they do, what they think, how they work, and that what they're doing is important.
Wonderful. Like this is such a great, genuine, like this is basic management and leadership. From the ages of Dale Carnegie, right?
Yeah.
This is what's old is new again, but this is tried and tested, and people actually do need to feel that they are valued and recognized as for the humans they are, with their hopes and their fears and their personalities, right? And you're describing an environment where everybody really is is valued for the individuality that they bring, and a leader who is genuinely curious, actually, too, right? You cannot instill that. You have to have a leader who is genuinely curious and cares. And that's where the magic happens. I do have a question. Let's one more question on the IT leadership and their teams. Of course, every domain of business is now being disrupted with these new technologies that are coming in and breakthroughs that are occurring a couple of times a day. But so is IT department. So are the IT skill sets. People who, of course, are there to maintain and operate legacy systems, who now themselves are in a position that they need to continue learning and developing. And how would you be advising CTOs, CIOs, who are looking to transition their workforce, IT workforce, from the legacy systems to these new environments? What would be your advice to CIOs?
Yeah, my advice would be they're not that much different. I mean, the compute paradigm that's running in a mainframe versus running in a cloud are virtually the same. We still use the same sort of compute and storage, database technology. The paradigms are absolutely transparent. I worked in both environments. Obviously, we worked with legacy systems in the 80s. Make sure I didn't hear mute. And now we're moving into more modern systems where you're going to find that most of what you learned in legacy environments transfer nicely into modern systems. I prefer, by the way, to take someone who came from a legacy world, retrain them in more modern systems like on the cloud, because normally they're very efficient in how they build and deploy their systems because they were dealing back in the 90s, like I was, with an 8K KB stack.
Mm-hmm.
And so they think a little differently in terms of how they run their problems. But the knowledge is transferred fairly easy. I haven't seen people who are skilled in legacy stuff even if you call LampStaff legacy or old DB2, DB2 COBOL applications, things like that, who maintain them, that weren't able to transfer into more modern systems, inclusive of cloud, very easily. In other words, there's when they get in there, everything's the same in terms of how we're storing information. It's the same in terms of how we're using. Now, the operating systems may be different, the programming tools may be different, but how you program, how you deploy it, how you use it, how you do architecture, there's a lot of patterns that are just completely transferable from one to the other. And I think we have a tendency to have people who just focus on legacy and that's all they do throughout their career, and then focus on the new stuff, cloud native applications, all they focus on in the career. And they swear that both worlds are different. And when you have one transfer to the other, they realize that many of the skill sets are transferable, and it's not that much of a difficult of a leap. In fact, like I said, some of the disciplines I think people learn in using legacy systems and moving
That's
into
actually
modern systems are more valued.
that's actually a very, very good advice. The disciplines around how do you get things done are persistent.
Exactly.
The what's have changed, but the pillars of that discipline actually remain constant. And if you position it that way, that immediately makes it less scary for those people who are expected to learn new things. To say, look, your values, things that you've learned that made you successful are still in place, right?
That's right.
And that is really actually very, very good. That's a great advice. Uh, and David, maybe, and we are approaching time, but want to be respectful of the full hour that you've given us. You have mentioned data as a differentiator. Data, your own data, organizational data, that is really the source of gold, right? As this, as data becomes ever more critical in everybody's journey to figure out how to best leverage AI for themselves in their organizations, uh, how would you suggest organizations should be thinking or rethinking their data governance, their security strategies? Any reflections on that, or great examples or trends that you've seen?
Yeah, the big one would be, stop doing everything native to whatever whatever platform your data is residing on. I have a tendency to see that as a limitation. So in other words, they'll have it on Amazon, Microsoft, Google, on-prem, perhaps a private cloud provider, things like that. And they'll want to implement governance and security on each one of those platforms using whatever native technology that's available on the platforms. For example, the ones that are provided by the cloud provider. And my advice to them is you have to manage those as a single platform. And so you get security systems and governance systems that have control planes that reach across the different cloud providers, and many of them can also reach across on premise, whether it's identity access management, common encryption systems, things like that. So we're not solving the problem six different times for six different platforms. We're solving the problem one, maybe two times, and we're able to transfer it to the different platforms by using abstraction and other systems that are out there. We have security abstraction layer, security managers are able to work across platforms. They're always underutilized. I don't see them used as much as they should. And everybody wants to solve security problems in a tactical way. Now, the problem is it means you have to come together with the other owners of the platform. And that's where
Yep.
people run into the problem. I don't want to work with Sally. I don't want to work with Jim. I'm just going to go ahead and implement my security on my AWS system using whatever AWS tools and technologies that AWS recommends. But you're making things more complex because now we have a silo of technology and a silo of skills and a silo of security that only exists in your domain. It doesn't exist across domains. So everybody else has to solve the same problem using different tools and
Yeah.
technology. Why don't we centralize it, put it under a single layer of abstraction and do it that way? And that seems to blow people's minds. But the thing is, we're not going to deal with this complexity and heterogeneity issue unless we learn how to do that. And your ability to get to value is going to be much more apparent if you're able to do that because you solve the problem once, you have the same set of skill sets that operates across the platforms. You have singular control. You have the ability to have a unified observability across these various platforms. So you can, watch someone who's attacking a system, that's going to be reflective of the other ones. You're not doing that within a silo. You're doing that holistically within the company. Easy problem to solve, in my opinion. It just most people don't seem to be using it because they think tactically, normally because of the political environment they live in. And
Yep.
the fact of the matter is they're taught to do that, and they're even funded to do that, and no one's encouraging them to look across the platforms.
This is yet another fantastic advice. David, thank you so much. This was truly a masterclass on these three superbly important, relevant, and timely topics: evolution in cloud, what's happening out there, AI, what's happening out there, and tech leadership to bring it all together. I want to really thank you very much for your time. This has been recorded. We're going to post it on TechTonic Conversations YouTube soon. And for those audience members who are interested, this Friday, the 7th of February, I'll be welcoming back Deloitte's Tech Trends 2025 team as we are going to do a deep dive into tech trend number one around spatial computing. So please register for that, join us for that conversation. It'll be riveting, as I say. With that, David, thank you so much again, and I wish you a lovely Monday afternoon.
Thank you, Developer.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.